Greetings, Internet. Didier here, and it is an exciting time for Star Wars Unlimited because PQ season is in full swing of things, and we have results pouring in. And lo and behold, I actually have with me today for a special interview Sundeep, aka SunnyD, recent tournament champion, recent PQ winner. So, what PQ did you actually take down? Why don't you talk about that for a little bit?
Sure. First, thanks, Didier, for having me on this. The PQ that I won was the Saturday, the 25th PQ for January in Virginia Beach. Yeah.
So are you close to Virginia, or did you just decide to roll it?
It was about 3.5 hours away from me. I live in Northern Virginia now, and I had a few friends that they originally played at a game store that hosted this PQ for a very long time. So they convinced me that it's a good event to go to. And I was deciding between going to this one or the Hex PQ in New York the same day. That one had some very good prize support, and a lot of great players were at that event. I was actually on the wait list for that one, and I wasn't sure if I would get off it, so I made the decision to go to the Virginia Beach one. And obviously I don't regret it now. Yeah.
Right. I was going to say, I actually was at the Hex & Co. PQ, and you're right. There were a lot of big names there. And it was very competitive, very tough Swiss. So yeah, you definitely made the correct decision taking down the PQ with Han Green. Now I did want to talk about the way that I know you, Sundeep. You are actually, I know you as the Dragon Ball Z world champion. So that's how I know of you and how we first met each other. So what I wanted to ask you, because it's fun. Did you play Star Wars Destiny?
Yes, I played Star Wars Destiny for a couple years when it came out. I didn't play it nearly as competitively as both the Dragon Ball Z game and then this game. I had been getting into my professional life and work right around that time, so that's where I kind of took that break from card games 2 years into Destiny.
Okay. So it's very interesting because I think you and I have a very similar, either our love of games, and that's kind of what I wanted to ask you, is because, coming from Dragon Ball Z, I originally had someone approach me about Star Wars Destiny and said, hey, there's this card game coming out. It's a lot similar to Dragon Ball Z. You should try this. And I'm just kind of curious with your experience and where you're coming from as the Dragon Ball Z world champion, one of the best Dragon Ball players in the world. Now coming to SWU, taking down the PQ with all the other success that you've had in 1Ks, like, what do you feel? Do you feel in Dragon Ball Z, the skills that you learned in Dragon Ball Z, what skills do you feel are translated into Star Wars Unlimited? And what are the things, like, comparison between the games? And, like, what do you love about both games?
Yeah, I think the main dynamic that drew me into both Destiny and this game was a common dynamic in Dragon Ball Z, which was the chess mechanic, right? You take a move, then your opponent takes a move, right? Without having to play your full turn. So that creates a lot of methodology with sequencing that isn't normally there in other games where you play out the full turn, right? Because you have to think about how your opponent's going to immediately respond to a move you make, right?
Yeah.
And then what's the best combination of you and your opponent reacting through a given phase in this game. So that's what drew me into both Destiny and this game. And similarly to you, when Destiny came out, I was introduced by other Dragon Ball Z players, and they told me that the game feels similar to that game. And then I remember during the Gen Con, you were there too at that Gen Con in 2016.
Oh, the Destiny tournament.
Yeah, not the Destiny tournament, the Dragon Ball Z one before Destiny.
Oh, okay.
There was FFG was just previewing or demoing Destiny, right? And we were playing in a couple Dragon Ball Z events, but I went and demoed it. I think I got the Rey and Kylo promos from that, and that's how I got into that game.
Wonderful. That's awesome, dude. Yeah, and you are absolutely right about the back and forth actions. What's cool about, for those listeners who don't know about Dragon Ball Z, is you have this added element of strategy where you're not always fighting. You actually have to enter combat, whereas in this game, like, you're taking the back and forth actions. But in Dragon Ball Z, there's this added layer of strategy because the decision of whether or not to enter combat on your turn and actually fight your opponent is there. Just one little difference between the two games. But now that you have taken, I mean, you've had so much success with Han Green, so much. Like, I actually lost count of how many tournaments that you've won with Han Green at this point. But as a seasoned Han Green player, everyone has to be asking this question. I have to ask you: Han Green or Han Yellow? What's the pick here? Where is it?
It's always been green for me. Yeah. So when DJ was revealed in set 2, there were a little bit of an indication before Han Yellow was popularized in the first few tournaments that it could be the better deck with the DJ combo. People knew about DJ and Tech. They didn't necessarily know about DJ with Han Flip just directly in yellow as a 7. But I always felt that the Han Green deck was more dynamic in its endgame than yellow had. And it's not just Han that I play green decks with. It's a bunch of other leaders as well, and I feel the same that that aspect adds not only ramp, but it adds more endgame management and other beat stick kind of units. All of these that complement a style like yellow and other styles, right? So I've always been a fan of that green style with a lot of decks.
Yeah, so one of the things that I talk about Han Green with is I say, like, well, one of the things that with Han is you always talk about having two hands. Yep. You have your hand, and then you have the tech hand, right? Like the resource line, right? But Han Green actually has 3 hands because you have your discard pile too, which is just an added layer of strategy to the deck. So why don't you talk about that for a little bit? Like, do you agree with that statement about, like, there's 3 hands in Han Green, or?
100%, and I actually didn't think of it that way before until you just mentioned it now. But yeah, it does have 3 hands. And early on in set 1, I was doing something interesting with Sneak Attack and Fleet Lieutenant from the discard pile with Home 1. So that felt like you had to really navigate and set up the discard pile so that you could enable that, right?
Right.
So that's a prime example where you use the discard pile as your 3rd hand. The way that I thought about Han, before you mentioned that the discard pile is an additional hand, I thought of it as like a hand and a half, because not all the time you're going to have Smuggle, but a lot of times you're going to have Smuggle. I had a discussion with a player that is also a PQ winner now, George the Hulk. He's played a lot of this deck called Hondo, and that deck, when he was first popularizing it, I felt that was a true double hand deck. Because you were playing almost Plum the Smuggle every single turn. Yeah.
Interesting.
This deck has kind of that half Smuggle, half from the hand, and then I think also half from the discard pile, like you said, in the end game. It's pretty cool. Yep.
Yeah, because the obvious one is Home 1, of course, that it enables that, hey, your discard pile is kind of your hand. Mm-hmm. But the hidden one, the one that only Han players really know about, is the Marauder.
Yes.
Enabling you, like, if they take out your tech, I'm gonna Marauder it, or I'm gonna Marauder my DJ back, I'm gonna Marauder my tech back, or and it's just crazy things you can do with the Marauder.
Correct, and also Spark of Hope as well, right?
Right. Yes.
So, Marauder is one of the most underrated cards, I think, right now. And I did not realize its potential until this set, actually. In set 2, I was playing it maybe at 1 and 2 in certain builds, but I never maxed out on it until I focused on using it for this specific build. And I think the situation that comes up very often with Marauder is Marauder on itself as the only target, and that can ramp you to the flip turn very fast. Yeah, and there is one line that is almost a 90 plus win rate line low chance that you open it, but
Hmm.
where you have a resupply and double Marauder, right? And you can flip Han on turn 2 itself. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. So why don't you just explain that? Because I'm even having trouble wrapping my
Sure,
head around
sure.
this.
So I did this twice in the past PQ. I've done it a number of times online. But if you have um, a resupply and then double Marauder, what you do is you will resource one of the Marauders, and you're gonna put down another resource so that you can play resupply turn 1 with Han. Then in your going into phase 2, you'll defeat one of the resources. That defeated resource will be the first Marauder. Then you'll be at 4 resources because you've resupplied turn 1. All you do is you put down a resource to be at 5 for Han. Then you play Marauder, target Marauder. You're at 6 resources, and you can instantly flip Han. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, so
90% win rate, huh?
yeah, it must be. I don't think I've lost the game with that opening. I'm just theorizing that it's very hard to. The drawback that has is if they have an immediate out to Han on the next turn, maybe it could feel bad. But I feel like you're very much ahead because you'll have a Marauder out and a Han out on turn 2. Um, there's not many
Yeah.
decks that have that turn 2. Usually their turn 2 play is it's like a 3 cost unit, right? So this is
Right. Yeah.
nothing.
And you're attacking both arenas, and you got that ambush too,
Yeah.
and it's a 4/5 the Marauder. So, and actually both Han. Well, that's not relevant for your leader, but just them not being able to take fell you
Yep.
is also relevant.
That's right. Yeah. Mhm.
For that those risky early game plays. So now the next question, of course, bringing up the deck list, talking about your deck list in its entirety. We kind of already discussed a lot of the cards that you play, but I did want to ask you if and if there's differences or if it's something you've already discussed, just mention it. Like your favorite card in the deck, and then your favorite combo in the deck.
So my favorite combo in the deck and favorite card in the deck. My favorite card, I mean, it's a very generic choice, but it has to be Tech.
Oh
That's
yeah.
that's probably been my favorite on green card since set 2. Um, common friend of ours, Dan from Main Deck, and Jason Toro actually revealed that card on their as one of their previews, and since then I've always been a fan of that. So that's kind of my generic choice for my favorite card, but in the past weekend, I think my favorite card that I played was Tranquility, because that is something that is a less played card. It is the promo card for doing well at these PQs, but not many people play it, and I think it's really good against control because you can set up an infinite loop of it. As long
Right.
as you have one in the discard, and then your second copy will always recur um, the next one, and then it will create a loop. The other reason that it is really good is there's not much in space at that cost. That isn't understated either. So this is that. So this card is a 7/6, right, for 7,
Right.
and that means it's better setted than any of the ground units at 7 as well, right? So if you think of
Yeah, it's
Enfys
true.
Nest 5/7, Han is a 6/6, and you can really use Tranquility for lane dodging at that 7, and especially ramping ahead to 7. It feels like they'll have less responses to it since it's in the less targeted arena, right? So I think it's a
Yeah.
very good card right now. When maybe next set it might not be as good since we'll get a lot of um, space centric answers, maybe or other units. But it also could be even better because of the piloting on top of it, right? So we'll see.
Yeah, and that salvo card that was recently revealed, right? Green is getting a board wipe, so
Oh.
that's also relevant.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Infinite Tranquility because I was actually on the Infinite Tranquility for a while now because of I play Padme. And
Awesome. Yeah.
Padme loves Republic units, and I would often just either put 2 main or 2 side for the Infinite Tranquility loop against blue decks. It's really relevant. So, how many times was that relevant in the PQ?
Yeah. In the moment, I thought it was good, not great. But then as I do my kind of retro of the tournament, I realized I did actually play Tranquility a lot through the day. Um, the loop itself was relevant in a few games, but lane dodging was more relevant. I would say,
Yeah.
because oftentimes they'll have ambushers in ground to deal with your other sevens in ground, right?
Right.
But in space, they not necessarily have that. And something that was underrated was, so you've played the Republic decks with Tranquility, so you know that you can get a lot of benefit off of attacking with it and then playing a board out. You can't really
Definitely.
do that in the build that I played because Tranquility and R2 are the only Republics I played. However, R2 playing it after you attack with Tranquility is a good enough play because you get to play it for one, and in the end game scenario, it adds to your late game engine of finding another power card as a follow up, right?
Right. Because then you have 7 still
Correct.
on the next turn.
Yeah, yeah. So it
Yeah,
just
because you
helps you
drop
build your
Tranquility for
energy.
7.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Really cool
Yeah,
stuff.
you can play it and then you'll still have seven. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so one of the things I did want to mention and talk about, so I want to talk about two other things about your list. We talked about the Marauder and Spark of Hope enabling the discard pile as your hand, which is just crazy. It's one of the most unique things that I feel the deck does that the green deck just doesn't, I mean, the yellow deck just doesn't get that.
Yeah.
You don't get that with Yellow Han. But I did want to talk to you a little bit about your decision to only run 2 Han Solo units, and then you're running 2 Enfys Nest, the 1 Cad Bane. We could talk about running why you're running 2 Luke Skywalker, but I think everyone on the phone kind of knows how powerful Luke Skywalker is. Even for 9, it's still strong.
Yep.
But I want to talk about like the decision about the 1 Cad Bane, the 2 Enfys Nest, and how that played out in the PQ.
Yeah, yeah. Enfys Nest was honestly a MVP card. That puts in a lot of work into the mirror. So I play 2 Han yellow mirrors, not Han green mirrors. And most of their units are under that threshold for Enfys Nest. And if you stick a blaster on Enfys Nest, almost everything is under it, right? Um,
Yeah.
so it is really good into both that, Sabine, and Quinlan. And even Django. I did play 1 Django as well. So that was, I would say, I agree to your point. We don't need to talk too much about Luke. I think Luke was the number 1 card to get off of Ewing. The second best card was actually Enfys Nest, not Han Solo unit, in my opinion. Because
Okay.
Han Solo unit, it sometimes deals with their most immediate threat in ground only, but sometimes it gets walled by a sentinel, right? And Enfys Nest doesn't have that issue. And in this meta, I didn't really feel like there was a ton that I had to worry about on the curve that I'd play Enfys Nest, where it wouldn't bounce something, right?
Yeah.
I can see there being a meta where Enfys Nest is not as good, but in the current meta, it was my second favorite Ewing target after Luke, for sure.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of space decks right now, and a lot of lane dodging happen, and that's one of the things about like one of the best answers to a big endgame unit is a little sentinel,
Yeah.
and Enfys Nest just doesn't care about that at all in many, many different ways.
Yeah, and so Han oftentimes is so when you play it, it trades without taking damage, but in the follow-up turns, it usually only does that, right? It keeps attacking into a unit, but Enfys Nest has the possibility of on a follow-up turn attacking into one unit and bouncing another, right?
Right.
So that's something that Han doesn't have, and that I think is incredibly powerful too.
Yeah. More and more people are being turned on by that card, especially the yellow Han lists. We're seeing just really all yellow decks, all yellow hero are slowly realizing that she can hang with the best 7 cost units in the game right now. So amazing to see that in the list, in the main deck, right? But how about that Cad Bane?
Yeah, yeah.
The one of Cad
I'm
Bane.
gonna talk about that next. I liked it a lot. I think it does fill a gap that the other sevens don't. There are situations where you'll see a 8 coster on board or a really wide board that you need to immediately answer. And Cad Bane is the only one that can do that. And I think I said 8 coster, but 8 HP unit,
Right.
right? Yeah. So The example is Avenger, right? You can Cad Bane an Avenger.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can oftentimes Cad Bane another Cad Bane that comes up, right? And Enfys Nest or Han can't deal with that. Luke can't even deal with it in one action. There were some situations, and then oftentimes it can take 2 to 3 units off the board in just one move. I liked it a lot, but this one is the riskiest, I would say, because
Yeah.
if they do have the immediate answer, they just get their units back, and then you'll have to deal with them again the next turn, right? But
Yeah, because I was gonna say, like, I'm a blue player, right? I play a lot of blue, and I look at Cad Bane and I think, oh, that's free candy.
yeah,
Like, you spent your whole turn, and I'm gonna fell the dragon, and then I'm gonna also play another 3-drop, and you're gonna be so far behind.
yes.
So I'm
At the
glad that
same
you're
time,
highlighting
I
the risk
do
of it.
think that it is best against aggro matchups, where they have developed a board presence that you immediately needs to answer, that you can't just answer one of them with a one of those other three, right? Either Luke or Han Solo or Enfys. But it does come up, and I thought about the other possibilities of sevens, right? You can run Maul, right? But Maul does the same thing that the others do.
Right.
Yeah, it's an ambusher. So this is the only one it uniquely fills a gap that the others don't.
Yeah, it could go cross arena.
Yeah.
Stealing Avenger is probably really relevant. Very risky, but also
And
really
also
relevant.
Snoke. Snoke is a huge problem for the deck too, right? So
Yeah.
you can steal that too.
Amazing. Okay, great. So coming from you are probably the most Han Green experience that of a person that I know, just because you've played it for all 3 sets
Mhm.
and a large number of tournaments. So one of the questions that I personally am interested in hearing you answer is what you think that Han Green's or Han in general's best matchup is, and what is his worst matchup? Because I'm sure that people on the call are like, "How do I beat Han? Tell me the answer."
Yeah, so Han Green, um, this is a deck that I don't feel has any auto win matchup, right? You can lose to everything actually playing Han Green. And that sometimes can turn people off, right? Because you can't just play Sabine and then say sit down against maybe a Palpatine and have a auto win. This one you do have to grind. I think the key thing with Han Green is it has a lot of auto win card draws and lines, right? Resupply oftentimes blows out a lot of game scripts.
Yeah.
BJ Tech is a line that can come up, which is usually a blowout. But a lot of the games that are grindy, you have to play very carefully. If they have an answer to your flip, you have to know how to navigate that. Sometimes you'll have to do the pass, or maybe they pass and then you claim situation going into the next turn, and then flip pawn after you resource once, right? So that's where this deck really you'll have to figure out if you can pilot it right well enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a lot of reps to do that. There are a lot of games that I played where I was losing and I couldn't figure out why I was losing until I really understood all those different scenarios. But
I see.
to answer your question though, what am I most afraid of running into
Yeah.
on green is probably a villain green deck that has ramp and heavy endgame.
Right.
Yeah, because that is something that you'll have to, if that's in the meta, you'll have to sideboard for. And the strengths of Han Green is making sure that you can make the game script in your favor and make people respond to you. And in that kind of situation, I feel like you have to respond to them because they're ramping and they have better endgames units as villain than Hero
Right.
does. I've always felt that way since set one. Yeah, I always had problems with cards like a Devastator in set one. I mentioned Snoke, Avenger, right? In set two onwards, it was Crate Dragon. There's not a lot of answers to that. It's really that you have to make sure that you can ramp and play carefully, go wide with units to beat those matchups.
Yeah, with Crate Dragon, it's like you waylay and then you just pray that you can end the game.
Yeah, the game plan is like to push enough damage before that blows you out, right? Because it will blow you out when they have it. And there's a lot of iterations I've had of Han Green where I was running more answers to that end game, right? I used to run Change of Heart, and a couple other cards that would just answer that, but they would be kind of costly answers, but still.
Right.
Yeah. The easiest matchup, and this is gonna probably surprise people a lot, but I think the easiest matchup are those mid-range aggro decks. So that is Quinlan, right? Certain play styles of Sabine, and people think Sabine is a bad matchup, so that's why I think it might surprise people. But yeah, it's probably those mid-range decks that lean a little bit more aggro.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up Sabine and also bring up that some people think Sabine is a bad matchup for Han Green, because I was actually at the Hex & Co. PQ and I was talking about how I felt like Han Green was the best deck in the format. Mm-hmm. Funny story, Han Green went on to win the Hex & Co. PQ. Mm-hmm. But at the time, people were ridiculing me for that opinion. I think I was having this opinion around round 4 or 5 in the tournament, and then they brought up Sabine as a counter. And I, as a Han Green player, did not understand that statement whatsoever, because you're playing a turn ahead. Yes. You're playing a turn ahead of Sabine. How is this a bad matchup?
I think it's the way that you approach the matchup that maybe some people will think it's a bad matchup. But if I always approach the matchup as I'm trying to out aggro them, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and in that approach, being a turn ahead, like you said, feels exactly that. You're a turn ahead, you're an action ahead, or an action or two ahead, right? So
absolutely, yep. I'm glad to hear you say this. So this is great. I do have a very interesting question about some fringe cards that I think may be on your short list for the deck. Yep. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about this sideboard a little bit, because I'm staring at the 3 Spark of Rebellions in your sideboard and 0 Spark of Rebellions main, and I just have to ask you about that decision, because that's pretty unique, I would say. Most Hans are definitely running at least 2 Spark of Rebellion main. So I have to ask what the decision was there and how that worked out.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a meta decision, right? I feel like this meta is heavy tempo, right? Tempo mid-range, tempo aggro. So in that situation, you want to be playing units that do stuff most often, or ramp. And Spark of Rebellion. It can shut off some key things that even those decks do, but oftentimes they'll have a second tempo aggro play in their hand, right? So you'll take out one of them, but they have a one that's maybe not just as good, but nearly as good, right? For that given turn. Where it shines is so on flip turns, if they need to specifically plan out and play something on their flip turn. I'll give you an example with Anakin, right? Jedi lightsaber. That can be a blowout against Han Green, because especially this version doesn't have very many answers to a big beat stick, especially a big beat
stick. Yeah, you don't run Bamboozle.
Yeah, currently I don't run Bamboozle, exactly.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so in that situation you would want Spark Rebellion, right? To hit those problem cards. You want it versus control. So if you see a lot of boss blues in your meta, you'd want it. If you see a lot of villain blue, soft control or hard control, you'd also probably want it. But against the Django, Sabines, Quinlans, even other Hans, it can be good against other Hans, but I think it's better against Han Green than it is against Han
Right.
Yellow.
Absolutely, 100% agree. I was actually just about 100% agree with you there. That's a great point there. I think your sideboard makes sense to me, especially the scannings, because that's the meta right now. But I did want to ask you about cunning because I'm sure people will ask about cunning,
Yeah.
and like what role that played and when you brought it in.
Yeah. Yeah. So I brought that in versus aggro. Um, I brought it in versus Django, versus Quinlan, versus Sabine, and it just enhanced the game plan that I mentioned to you earlier, right? Where you want to be the aggro against aggro, so it feels when you tap down 2 units and then boost a unit or bounce a unit, you're doing exactly it's feeding into that, right? And I've always been a proponent of cunning for 6. I know people said it's not good value, but I think if you were going to run cunning for 6, this is the deck that you can do it in because you can ramp, and it oftentimes that you can pseudo feel like you're playing cunning for 5 because of the ramp, and yeah, in this deck.
Yeah, because you're also another thing needs to be considered with the Han is that you're playing bigger units on average than other decks. Therefore, playing stickier units with more HP, you're going to have more of a board presence, especially because of all the ambush as well.
Yeah.
You're going to have more of a board presence than your average, maybe mid-range or definitely your average aggro deck. So that cunning is just going to hit really, really hard in the like kind of late-ish game, mid-late game.
Last mention for cunning is I played against Kira ECL in the finals of this tournament, which I actually think is a bad matchup for Han Green, because the
green villain, right?
Yeah, it's green villain, and not only is it green villain, they have the right answers to your flip, because they can this particular build plays cards like Gideon Hask, and if they ramp, oftentimes they can play a Gideon and kill something, make it 6, so that it answers your flip before you flip, because Gideon will get the experience, right, from defeating something.
Right.
And even if they don't do that, they can flip Kira, put your Han at 3, and then kill it. 3.
Yeah, I'm glad you're mentioning this because one of the things I've seen, we have a few Kira players in our local scene, and one of the things I'll see with these Kira players will do, the good ones, is they will delay their flip to make sure they're pinging your leader.
Yeah.
And they will make sure they're they're using Kira in many different ways, many different lines with that deck. It's a great deck.
Definitely, yeah. So I brought in cunning versus that deck game 3 in the finals. And I brought it in, I didn't bring it in game 2, but I brought it in game 3 because I thought there was a potential lines where it would stop them from dealing with my flip. And then also it would blow out after they've burned their resources, right?
Yeah.
And I did end up in a crucial endgame state, exhausting their board that they used to account for what I had in ground, and boost my lane dodge board, which was a tranquility in space, right?
Yeah. Nice 11 there.
Yeah, exactly. So it came up even in those situations. The discard is underrated too versus control, but I wouldn't specifically cite it in for control because of that random discard.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, often what I will do with cunning against control is +4 discard, because it puts them in a really weird spot, especially if you hit a good card with the discard.
Yeah.
They could have to make some really awkward plays just to be able to deal with that +4 unit.
Yeah.
But okay, so I did want to ask about, because Han Green is one of those decks you can almost play any card in the game in this deck. I mean, you got Luke Skywalker's, Cad Bane for 9. The full game is on your fingertips. So there must be a short list of cards that you have as like fringe ads, or cards that you would consider, or cards maybe that you had in and you took out. So what is like a short list, maybe like 2 or 3 cards for you that you're really like looking at?
So I'll mention 3 cards, right? The first is one that probably surprises people that it's not in the list, and that's Bright Hope. Bright Hope,
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, Bright Hope is not at all in the list, or main or sideboard, right? And my reasoning was, actually it was more like validation testing. I tested a bunch of games and on Carbest using that Sue stats that they have, and I saw that my least played card out of 100 games with the deck was Bright Hope. It was less played than the one of Cad Bane, which means that I was I probably had it more often than that one of Cat Bane. I was just choosing not to play it, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I cut it. But in a Django heavy meta, it's still worth a spot. So that I don't think I would main it still, but I think it deserves a sideboard spot if you think you're going to see a lot of Django. So that's the first
And the
consideration.
and the reason that you dropped it out is just, I mean, the stats obviously, but
Mhm.
just because, like, what do you? Let me ask you, what are you doing against Django then? Because like,
Yeah.
Bright Hope is so good against
So
Django.
this is the reason, right? I was still beating Django's without Bright Hope, and that's because of the three of Marauder. Marauder
The
allows you to
Marauder.
be it's a card that's more proactive than Bright Hope. It's not just the defensive card. It is usually a 2-for-1 plus a ramp versus Django, and that's a lot stronger than Bright Hope. And I was always preferring to play that against them over Bright Hope.
All right, cool.
Yep.
All right, and then your two other cards.
My two other cards is the Falcon, the Big Falcon, Millennium Falcon. Um, I was playing around with the smuggle ratios in this deck, and I did feel that there's potential for another smuggle card, but just one or two extra. And the one that I would like to play is Falcon. There's Zori Bliss that you could play as well, but I like Falcon for the lane dodging aspect of it a little bit more
Yeah,
than Zori Bliss.
5 hits hard too.
Yeah, and the very last card that I would mention is the Leia unit. Leia unit, I missed that one. Yeah, so in this tournament, I did get away with winning matches, but there were some games that potentially I probably lost because I didn't have the ability to tap something down with Leia. And I think where that really shines is that situation I mentioned that they have a big beat stick unit that is upgraded or a leader. So it could be Sabine with Darksaber, Sabine with General's Blade, Anakin with Jedi Lightsaber, and you cannot deal with those, right? So I did miss it, yeah. And I would play it at least as a 2 of probably, because of the synergy with 2 ofs if you have 2 ofs, 3 ofs if you have Marauder. But
Right.
it's under
So what would you drop though for the Leia? You
yeah,
think?
it's tough tough to think about, but maybe Sundari Peacekeeper. You could not drop it entirely, maybe drop it to 2, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
drop a Sundari Peacekeeper plus an R2. It's gonna be a trade-off because you're making the other aspects of the deck less consistent, so that you have another tool in your toolbox, right? But
Yeah.
there's ways that you can build it. You don't need to necessarily max out 3 of everything, right? So you can cut cards to 2 and go that route.
Yeah, I really enjoy Leia. One of the things I like about Leia, because I play a Leia in a lot of decks. Well, in Luke, she's a better crafty smuggler, right? Because
Mhm.
she's just literally a shielded. You can make her just 2/2
Oh,
shielded,
yeah.
just like crafty smuggler.
Mhm.
So she's an auto 3 in Luke because of that reason. But in other decks, I like the go wide, like the untapping of resource, even if you're not using it for a tap down. Like, so I can see. What I'm trying to say is I understand your reasoning for not including Leia here,
Yeah.
because if you're only using it for a tap down, looking at this list, you would utilize it less as for like the go wide way that you could do with her and untap and things like that, because you're playing much higher higher costed units. You're not playing Greedo and things like that. So I can understand your reasoning for excluding it.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's a huge reason to include it because you have Home 1 to get it, and you can also play it from the tech, with tech out from the resource room for 4, which is still a good value in that situation you need, right?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Great. All right. So as a closeout to this interview, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, and the elephant is the discussion that was recently had on FFG's live stream, where they said that they are watching specifically, and I'm going to use their specific words because I find when people word things, I find it interesting the words that they choose to use. They called DJ Han, in that order, anti-fun.
Uh-huh.
So that is the specific words that they use, and they said that they're watching them. So as a Han player from set 1 and a several time tournament winner with Han Green, how do you feel about that? What do you think? Do you agree, or how are you going to feel if this combo goes away?
Yeah, so Han has been my favorite leader since the beginning of the game. So uh, it would make me a little sad to see it be nerfed, but at the same time, I am of the opinion that that is a problem situation right now. So it should be addressed. There's many ways that they can address it, but I think that they should go ahead and address it. Yeah.
What do you think they should do to address it? I'm asking you the tough questions now.
Yeah, it's a tough question, and I just said how much I love Han, but my take is to go ahead and ban the Han leader. Yep.
You would ban Han leader?
Yeah.
Really?
So that was my take before I just heard this rotation content, right? That they're gonna be doing anyways. But my take was that Han leader is similar but less of a scale than Boba, of a future-proof leader. Like that temporary ramp will always be better with more cards that you can use for temporary ramp, right? Like it doesn't matter at any stage of the game, 4 or 5 resources, temping, getting ahead of curve. As that pull gets better, that leader will get better, right? So I think it was the same argument in the last set where you either ban Boba's armor, right, or you ban Boba, right? And that was maybe a little bit more like a stronger argument for banning one of the others because it was even more of a problem. But I think banning armor wouldn't have done it justice, right? It would be Boba resource gain and optimizing turns or optimizing your hands is too much of a problem. So now that they mentioned they're doing rotations anyways, I think that secondarily they can just ban DJ. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
see. I see. Okay, interesting take. Okay, so you're saying that specifically because of the rotation,
Yeah.
you feel like DJ is enough
Yeah.
because Han can exist in the one through five, one through
Exactly.
six
Yeah,
meta.
it will exist until set 7, I guess, right? Is when
Hmm.
it gets rotated out. So with that being considered, maybe you just ban DJ, which is the problem card, right? I think if you ban Han, then DJ is not a problem card anymore because you don't have anything else that can destroy a resource, right? So they can always answer the DJ and get their resource back at some point in the game, right? But,
Yeah. Yeah, I will say it does seem like they did design Han
mhm.
with the 5 costed flip in mind because his stats are low for a 6 cost leader, right?
Mhm.
So like the reason that they banned Boba is because he was way overstated for 5.
Yep.
But if you compare Han to other 6 leaders, Han is understated. So I think that there's something there that maybe they
Yeah.
actually did consider.
Yeah, but the understated aspect of it is not the reason why Han is, I guess, so strong or not. Maybe justifiably not strong, right? The problem with Han is uh, the ability to play ahead of curve. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's that.
from turn 1.
Yeah, from turn 1 itself. Yeah, yeah. Any point in the game.
All right. Well, thank you for jumping on here, Sundeep, and joining us and having a Han focused centric discussion. Congratulations again on your PQ win, and you'll be headed, I'm sure, to the world tournament, world championship, and I'm sure if I know you, then I think people might expect you to bring Han Green, but you also, with how World shakes out, you never know.
Yeah.
People bring spicy decks, and they have their secret sauce that they got in their back pocket, and it may be time to shock the world.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, and I think, yeah, I will look to innovate for that world tournament. Yeah, so we'll see it. We'll see how that goes.
All right. Well, good luck. I'm sure you'll have future success, and I will definitely be watching you succeed at Worlds as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Didier.